the involvement of 5 Arab nations in the first UN-led airstrikes against ISIS in Syria adds credibility to the view that the U.S. offensive is not an American military campaign against Muslims. Instead, it's a broad-based effort to defeat Islamic extremists.
And more broadly, over 40 nations have offered to help in this comprehensive effort to confront this terrorist threat, to take out terrorist targets, to train and equip Iraqi and Syrian opposition fighters who are going up against ISIL on the ground, to cut off ISIL's financing, to counter its hateful ideology, and to stop the flow of fighters into and out of the region.
Still, questions remain about the legal justification for launching airstrikes inside a country that hasn't given explicit approval. Adil Haque is an armed conflict scholar and law professor at Rutgers University, and he's writing a book on the moral foundations of the law of armed conflict, and is here in our New York studio. Adil, welcome to Arise America.
Thanks for having me.
So let me start here. I'm going to step back a minute. Do you believe that President Obama sufficiently made the case to justify these airstrikes in Syria?
So as of this afternoon, the United States informed the Secretary General of the United Nations that their basis for these strikes is collective self-defense, basically defense of Iraq. The idea is that Iraq is under ongoing armed attack from ISIS. ISIS can't be defeated in Iraq without defeating it in Syria. And if Iraq could defend itself in this way, then surely Iraq's allies, the United States and others, can come to Iraq's defense. That sounds very persuasive. There's just one problem, which is that Iraq isn't being attacked by Syria. It's being attacked by a non-state armed group, ISIS. The argument is that Syria is unwilling or unable to defeat ISIS. Therefore, the United States, Iraq, and others have to take matters into their own hands. But that legal proposition is very debatable.
Indeed, and there are many that are taking this debate on. The truth is that this U.S.-led coalition with 5 Arab states for the airstrikes that President Obama just announced this morning that happened overnight was not done with the approval of the UN Security Council. It was not done at the invitation of the sovereign government in Syria. So has the United States or this coalition at large broken international law?
Remains to be seen. Syria has said, interestingly, that it would be willing to cooperate with coordinated joint military operations against ISIS, but that any military operations launched on its territory without its approval, without its consent, without its coordination, would be viewed as an act of aggression. For its part, the United States has said that it won't even seek Syria's consent and will not coordinate in any way. So we have a really unique situation in which the territorial state is saying, we're willing to consent to joint operations, but the intervening state is saying, we're not asking for it, we don't want it. It's kind of an unprecedented situation in international law.
Yeah, it is so odd. And to your point, I believe it was the foreign minister in Syria that said that any airstrikes within their country without their collaboration would be seen as an act of aggression. How seriously should we take that, or how much concern should that engender?
Well, it should engender concern in one of two ways. On one hand, Syria has air defenses. If they really wanted to resist these strikes, they probably could. The fact that they haven't suggests that maybe they're okay with this, because after all, ISIS is their enemy as well. But we should all be concerned when international law is undermined, because what works for us will also work for other countries. So, for example, Russia may claim that Ukraine is unwilling or unable to prevent attacks on pro-Russian separatists or Ukrainian separatists, and use that as a pretext for using military force in Ukraine. So because this is a legal system, the law for us is the law for everybody. So we should be very careful when we broaden the permissive use of military force.
Is there any verbiage, whether it's Article 51 of the UN Security Code, whatever it's called, you know what I'm talking about. Is there verbiage that codifies what self-defense really is, that gives the United States or any coalition, very clear parameters for for claiming to take this action because of self-defense?
So Article 51 of the UN Charter.
Yes, thank you.
Gives each state the right to defend itself and to defend its allies when an armed attack occurs. But Article 51 doesn't specify whether that armed attack has to come from a state or whether it can come from a non-state actor. And if it comes from a non-state actor, what does that mean in terms of seeking the consent of the territorial state? And this is where we have uncertainty. The International Court of Justice has said, no, you need to seek the consent of the territorial state. But the United States, some other countries, and many legal scholars say, no, if the territorial state is unwilling or unable to suppress a non-state group, others can do that unilaterally in self-defense.
In terms of international relations, of course, the UN General Assembly is in session. The president spoke today, will be speaking again tomorrow. Does it behoove the U.S. president to bring the UN on board in this action?
The UN Security Council, which actually has the power to authorize the use of military force, will almost certainly not get behind this. Russia and China, it's very unlikely that they would permit the use of military force on the territory of their ally, Syria. However, if President Obama can marshal broad support in the General Assembly from a wide range of countries, that could add legitimacy to this military operation, though it wouldn't strictly affect the legality of the operation.
Something that's going to be debated and talked about for quite some time, I think. Adil Haque, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.